Good morning, everybody. So hopefully you're ready for a class. We've got some good stuff planned. It's a beautiful day out there, so thanks for joining me and getting your day started right. So let's go ahead and start with a little bit of marching. If you have some weights, you can hold the weights down in your arms. I'll show you a couple different positions that you can hold your weights. If you don't have weights, just do your marches. You can add in forward, side, and arm raises. I'm going to kind of get everybody started with these forward, arm, and side raises. If you don't have kettlebells or dumbbells, go ahead and stick with those. And so if you do, you can grab your kettlebells. We're going to start with them down low, down by your sides. Make sure we're never trying to hold the weights up off the ground. We're always driving the shoulders down towards the floor while our ribs and our head stay nice and straight, meaning our ribs anchor towards the floor, our head lengthens through the back of our neck, and we really focus on driving those arms down to the floor as we keep an open chest. Good. If you've got some lighter dumbbells or kettlebells, doesn't matter which one, if you've got some lighter weights, in about 15 seconds, I'm going to give you another option. If you don't have kettlebells and your arms are getting tired at that point from doing all those arms forward, side, and up, then you can go ahead and rest your arms and do a normal arm swing. If you've got a lighter weight, let's go ahead and start with that lightweight low. Let your heart rate come down just a little bit. Let your arms recover from those heavy ones. And now what we're going to do is go into a bottoms up position with our hands. So we're going to swing the bells up, and we're going to try and hold them without letting them fall on our wrist. We want a nice, strong, straight wrist here. We want to try and balance it with our elbows underneath. We don't want to try and grip it too hard in your hands. Keep those legs driving length through the middle of your thigh, and then let those weights come down. Rest for a second. If you want to lift them up again, we're going to go for about 35 more seconds. If you were resting your arms from the arm movement before, let's go ahead and add it back in. And so again, we could even, if you have a tall ceiling, you can go up overhead. Just make sure those elbows are locking and the shoulders and ribs are pulling down to the floor, and you don't find yourself looking up or lifting your chest. Good. So let's go ahead and bring your feet to a rest. Let your arms recover. Shake them out. If there's any tension, shake it off like it's water. Good. And so what we're going to do next is stand still, and we're going to grab a band. If you have a band, great. If you don't, then you can just do this without a band. It's not a big deal. But what we're working on is activating our abs and our lats to make sure our shoulders stay down as we try and press our arms up towards the sky. So as we're doing this, let's go ahead and push a little bit of resistance into that band. If you don't have the band, keep your hands about shoulder width apart. You can go a little wider, but you don't want a big wide space in between your arms. If you're doing this without the band, you want to be feeling how everything in the body is anchoring down towards the floor as the arms are learning to push up away from that anchored posture. The goal is to try and get the elbows to straighten, but if you feel your shoulders sneaking up or your ribs popping, then don't go quite as far. You'll work into those straight elbows. We have to find success, train success, not push ourselves to failure. So let's go ahead and let the band go, and we're going to go back to some marching. And for this action, I want to do a little bit of out, out, in. And when we're doing the out, out, in, you're just going to let those arms swing. Good. Let's try and go a little bit quicker. Back and forth. Feel that your body is staying nice and tight through this area right here. We don't want to be seeing anything where your body is loose or moving around. We want all this nice and tight. The legs are the loose thing that's moving right now. And so let's go ahead and go in place for just a second, and now put the other foot out first, so we can get the other side going through that action, leading us both in and out. Good, as long as your feet are moving too, that's important. Sometimes in class somebody will get off on their pattern and it doesn't really matter. Just keep moving. We'll be done with it in about 5 seconds. Good. And let's go ahead and rest on that one. So we're going to go back to the bands, and this time when we're going up with our arms, we're going to add a squat in. And so when you're squatting, I want you to make sure that you're really sending your hips back and you're not letting anything slide forward or letting any part of your foot come off the floor. We want to maintain contact with our foot on the floor at all times. So if you find the range that you're going in pulls your feet off, then don't go that low. Find some quality in your movements before trying to go really deep. So with this one, put a little stretch on the band, push your shoulders down as your arms push up, and then come back up. Every time you come back up, let's rest your arms and get them comfortable. And then push the arms up as you anchor through your shoulders and your abs. Sticking your hips back, opening through the crack of your butt. And it's a weird term, but it's the best cue that I can give you. We need to make sure that we're always opening our hips low. We're not thinking about bending through our back. So as we do these, feel you're opening and spreading your hips in the back. And then every time you come up to that full tall position in your hips and the middle of your knees. And then push your knees wide as you send your hips back. So you're finding that space between your legs. Let's go 2 more. Arms straight up as your body does produce a small tip. If you're straight upright, your back is either coming out of neutral or you're falling into your heels and you're going to fall backwards. So your goal is not to try and stay upright, but it also needs to be limited from bending forward to do your squat. There is a tip to maintain our neutral pelvis, our neutral spine, but we do not want to go as low as we can or as upright as we can into that squat. So let's go ahead next, and we're going to do a little bit of balance work. And with the balance work, we're going to start just by doing our normal arm segments during this balance. So we're going to add more balance in later today, but we're going to do it with some weights, with a little bit of challenge. But let's just start with our body weight to begin with. So let's go ahead and start on one foot. If you can lift the other foot off without letting that knee pinch in, then lift the other foot off, but it's okay to leave that toe rested on the ground so that you can really feel what you're trying to do by keeping your hips pushing in front of your ankles a little bit, making sure that you're not finding yourself back in your heels where you'll really feel your ankle and your knee and your calf responding more. We want to tell that to relax as we focus on those shoulders anchoring down, the ribs anchoring to the floor, and the shoulder and the ears raising up towards the sky. Good, let's switch legs. And now as you're with this leg, we're going to do our open and close. And just make sure that your palms stay forward on this one. As you reach your arms back into that stretch, keep your ribs anchored. Don't let them pop up. And let's go ahead and just go through as much range as you can keep the connection of your ribs anchored and your shoulders down. Good. We've got about 5 seconds here. Keep your knees loose and apart. Make sure you've got length through the middle of your groin. And let's go ahead and switch legs, and we're going to go into big canisters now. And for the canisters, we're imagining you have a big cylinder off to the side of each side of you, and you're trying to run your hands around the edge of that cylinder with the palms facing the center. We don't want our ribs to lift. We don't want our head to start reaching up through the chin. We also don't want to jam our chin into a tuck. Just feel that the back of your neck is long and your chin is loose and dropped, and it should almost feel like a bobblehead. We don't want to try and hold our neck in a certain position. And now let's go ahead and switch legs, and we're going to go into our beautiful day arm swoops. So imagine you're driving in the car and you just want to put your hand out the window and catch a wave of wind. Keep those shoulders down. See how high and how low you can go through this without letting your ribs or shoulders come out of their unit. Keeping that length at the middle of your knee. Keeping your toes nice and loose, making sure that you're not trying to grip your balance with your leg or your foot. And now let's switch legs, and we're going to go to our table cleaners. So for the table cleaners, shoulders are nice and low and anchored, ribs are anchoring down to the floor, but we want to leave those arms as loose and floating to clean that imaginary table at about our shoulder height. If you ever feel this start going into your neck, then just lower your table just a little bit, but really focus again on the energy that you're using to keep those ribs and shoulder blades anchored to the floor. And now let's go one more on our other side. And for this one, we're going to do little circles of our elbows. Our wrists are going to finish the circle, but it's really that I want you to try and make a circle with your elbows. Beautiful. Keeping the ribs down, keeping the shoulders anchored, keeping the back of the neck long. Reverse your circle, but stay on the same foot. Good. We're not trying to go high. We're just trying to feel loose through those arms so we feel every muscle getting a little work done. And now let's go ahead and rest. Roll your shoulders. Shake any tension off like it's water on your fingertips and just shake it out. Good. All right, so now we're going to go into our band again, and what I'd like you to do is put it around your ankles, or a little bit higher on your ankles if you're just starting out with this one. We're going to do some kickstand kickbacks. And if you've never done this before, or you ever feel this going into your knees, then my suggestion is to take the band off. Work on this action without the band first. Make sure you're listening to my cues so that you feel the energy going through the hip that you're standing on. If you feel this in your knee or the front of your hip or your ankle, chances are you're not quite getting the feel of it, and so we want to keep focusing on that before we add a bunch of resistance to it. So if you're one of my people who works out with me all the time, you can also hold a weight in your hand, but for the first set, I'm not going to add the weight to everybody else. So put that band around your ankles. We're going to find our feet a little bit spread. Let's go into a little bit of a squat, holding our good posture, ribs anchored down, shoulders anchored away from the ears, back of the neck long. And now we're going to shift our weight onto one side, and we're just going to do a tap in and out with that leg without letting the weight shift off of the standing leg. Now, while you're on that standing leg, I want you to pretend that my hand is right in front of your knee, and I want you to push your knee away from my hand to stick your butt out a little bit more. I want you to also make sure that that knee that is bent, that my finger's in front of, is pushing wide away from my hand. You don't want to lose any contact with the toe or the foot, but you're not holding tension in it either. Good. Let's give me one more, and then stand up. Let that hip relax for a second, and then we're going to go down to the other side. So down into your squat, push that foot back, feel the weight centering onto the stationary hip, push your knee back away from my imaginary hand, push it a little wider without losing any contact of your foot, reach to the back of your neck to counteract that butt going back, and really focus on those ribs staying anchored so that you don't start getting upright and find yourself into a bad position. 3, 2, and rest. So we're going to take that band off. Go ahead and rest for a second. Shake the water off your feet. Good. Grab a little drink of water. All right, so our next marching is going to use a weight in front of you. It's just going to be one weight. Doesn't matter, other than you want it to be something that challenges you a bit. So a 5-pound, that's about as light as you can probably go, that you'll actually feel something fire in. But if you've been doing this with me before, sometimes people can, you're doing somewhere around 20, 25 if you're in my ladies in class. But find something that challenges you a bit. And we're going to bring that weight up so that the weight, whether it's a dumbbell or a kettlebell, is around your chin. If it drops down, your body's going to drop down too. So we need this as our cue to make sure we don't let our body break. So what we're going to do, or break down, sorry, our body won't break from this. We just want to make sure that we're keeping healthy movements. So as we march, I want you to focus on those shoulders driving down to the floor, pinching your arms into your sides while your elbows float away, and really try and pull and push that weight at the same time to keep everything active through those upper body muscles. Good. We want to drive length through the middle of our knee, all the way down through the middle of our hip, to make sure that we're not staying in anything that would be in a shortened position. We want to find our length with every single step that we make down into the ground. Keep the weight up there, keep breathing. And let's go ahead and let your weight come down. Always using good form when you set down your weights. Same form that you pick it up and set it down with as the whole set, because typically that's where people get hurt, is when they're setting it down and they're not thinking about it anymore. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go back to that kickstand again. And this time, if you have a weight to hold in your hands, you can use it. We're going to hold it in that same position. That's why I'm giving you a few seconds here to rest and recover and to put your band back on. So go ahead and slip that back on. And if the band isn't really easy for you to get on and off, take your time here. There'll be plenty of time for you to work the set. And part of what we're doing here is making you do lots of movements, and having to put a band on and take it off and get it back on, that's all good work that you wouldn't normally do. So we're just increasing the amount of patterns that your body can do well. And so just welcome it, as opposed to getting frustrated with any changes that we do with the band. And so let's go ahead and same thing. We're going to grab that weight, bring it up nice and tall, and then we're going to spread our feet just a little bit, drop into our kickstand position of a squat, and then we're going to tap that foot back. Make sure that the tapping foot, the toe stays forward, and the knee and the toe don't turn outward. That creates a cheat. It also pulls your pelvis into a rotation. So we really want to focus on keeping that weight near our chin as our shoulders and ribs stayed anchored down towards the floor. Good. Let's go ahead and stand up. Take a little break if you want to drop your arms down. A nice stretch is also to put it behind your back. Just feel the length in the back of your neck as your arms relax to their full length. And just take a nice exhale. And now we're going to go ahead and bring that dumbbell or kettlebell back up to our chin height. We're going to go down into our squat. And now we're going to push back on that other leg. Good. Making sure that you're not turning that knee out. That's moving. But the stationary hip is always pushing away from my imaginary finger. That stationary knee is pushing wide a little bit. And we don't lose contact with the foot on the ground or let that kettlebell fall away from your chin. Keep that moving knee loose and bending. 3, 2, and let's go ahead and stand on up. Set your weight down, and let's step out of the band again. All right, so let's go ahead, and before we make our way to the floor, I want to do a little bit of work on our feet, okay? And with this first action, we're going to do a little marching in place. And if you're a woman, this comes easy because most of us have spent some time in a set of heels. So we are familiar with this feeling of being up onto our toes. Now, we're going to do a little bit of walking while you're up on your toes. And I find that it's a little bit better to walk around in a small circle as opposed to trying to walk in place. That's stiff, and sometimes it just feels weird. So what we're going to do on this next practice is not see how high you can get up into the air. We're trying to find what height can you lift off your heels that your weight is equally centered between your big toe knuckle and your pinky toe knuckle. And let's play a little experiment here. So rest down. If you go way too high, if you go as high as you physically can, and that's different for everybody, but everybody will feel their toes pull in, the fact that they're on their big toes more than or they might shoot out over their pinky toes more. But if you lower your heel down slowly and find that position where you feel more balanced, And here's a trick to this balance, guys. If you want to stay up in the balls of your feet without feeling like you're all over the place like this, you really have to pull those shoulders and ribs down to the floor. Without space between our ears and our shoulders, balance is very difficult on our toes. So this is partly you getting up onto your toes and working those muscles in your feet. Go ahead and let's do this. These are also practices in learning how to control your balance and hold on to this, the feeling that your shoulders and ribs are anchoring down as the head is lengthening you up like Geppetto's string. And feel how much less tension that puts in your foot than if you were to go ahead and rest for a second. We're going to try a bad set here, meaning we're going to try and go higher than you did last time. And not think about any of your posture. Just try and think about lifting your heels off the ground with no posture in mind, and walk around with your toes as high as they can. And that chances are that doesn't feel as loose through the legs. So now let's lower the heels a bit. Let's focus on the posture and feel how your leg muscles just kind of relaxed a little bit. Your balance improved slightly. And so that's what I'm looking for when we're doing these little toe walks. And this is really good for your plantar fasciitis. We want to make sure that we're increasing the endurance of our tendons and our muscles. And if we just rest, and you can go ahead and rest now, if all we do is stop moving and stop walking and stretch our foot to try and get rid of our plantar fasciitis, it typically doesn't work. And it certainly will come back as soon as you add that work back in. So being able to slowly progress into small little movements like this during your day, to add to your strength of your foot and to increase your balance in this position is really a really helpful tool to keeping your feet healthy and keeping good feeling and connection to your feet. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go down to the ground for a little bit of push-ups, planks, bird dogs, and beasts. Occasionally, we are going to come back up to our feet just to give your arms a break from that position. But for the most part, we're going to be going down a little bit. So bring down any equipment that you might need that is out of reach. And we're going to start on our hands and knees. So the only equipment that you're going to need in the next couple sets might be a band. So grab your band, and if you're somebody who doesn't have much comfort sitting back in between sets, use something like a block. You can let your feet relax into whatever position is comfortable for you. There's no rules to the sit back in this position, except you can't be in excruciating pain and you have to be off of your arms. Now, for some of you, the block you may not have, or that still isn't enough. Your knees still can't bend that much, and that's okay. So this is the position that you come up to, or lay on your back or side. I don't care. Whatever you do, please make sure in between each of these sets, you're not on your arms and you're not writhing in pain from your knees being uncomfortable because you're trying to attain the position that I'm sitting in. So let's go ahead and find your way to your hands and knees. And we're going to begin with a couple rock backs. And this rock back action is really a practice to find neutral spine no matter what position we're bending through. It's also a key component when we get up off the ground, if we know our butt needs to go up in the air as opposed to typically people are rounding into a child's pose. If we know that we have to stick our butt up in the air, that makes it easier to sit up, and therefore it also makes it easier to stand back up, right? So we don't need to stand up. I just wanted to kind of show you what the rock back is really trying to work on. It's about relaxing your knees wide and finding that space between your thighs to melt your pelvis into, and push away from your hands with your shoulder blades so that you're not becoming slack in your line at the top. So let's go ahead and we're going to stop on our hands and knees now, and let's go ahead and give me one bird dog with a reach of one arm and one leg. Make sure that the lifted hand is in a fist and you're pulling your shoulder away from the fist. Your long leg is long and pushing through the heel away from your hip bone. You're pushing your shoulder blades away from the floor. Your rib cages are pushing away from the floor. Your toes should be tucked under here, getting a little bit of a stretch. Hold this for 5, 4, 3, 2. Let's go ahead and make sure you place your knee nice and wide as you come back down. And let's go ahead and go to the other side. Make sure that toe's tucked under and lengthen through the arm and the leg. Find the center of your body. Maybe take a quick look down. Make sure that your belly button is in the center of the down arm and leg and you're not all the way over the leg. Keep pulling the shoulder blade and ribs away from that hand that's reaching forward. Keep lengthening through the middle of that long leg, through the heel. And then let's bring everything back and down. Hinge back through your hips and sit back. Good. Roll your shoulders. Turn your head to either side, keeping that chin nice and low as you look from side to side. And now on our next set, we're going to do an elbow plank. Give your wrists a little bit of a break. And during the elbow plank, let's do a little saw action if you can. If you can't quite do a plank on the ground, find something that's higher so that you can make it a little easier. Even a counter in a kitchen or something of that height is fine. Whatever you're feeling the success of connecting those ribs and lats through and not challenging yourself into elbows or shoulders pinching up towards your ears. So as you set up for this one, let's make sure your hands are straight forward. Your elbows are on the ground, your butt's stuck up in the air, and your head is looking between your elbows. We're going to step on back into our plank, and I want the elbows to push my body back onto my toes as my hips remain straight. It's very easy with these to start poking your butt up every time your hips track backwards. So maintain that nice tucked pelvis, feeling the length through the front of your hips and the length through your knees. And that helps you to channel into your abs more than your back. And so let's just do 5 more seconds here, pushing back onto your toes, bouncing forward, relaxing into a regular hold if the bounce is becoming too hard. And then let's go ahead and rest your knees down, stick your butt up, and let's go ahead and sit back. Take the weight off your arm. Wherever you feel comfortable, sit. Make sure your shoulders are resting. Good. Our next one is going to be a beast. If you've got a block or something to place on your back as a little bit of a challenge or a check, quality check, then grab it. If not, then just work on trying not to feel things come apart. The beast is always a practice in trying to connect our posture while our arms move freely and our legs move freely. So we're going to get into our beast position. Tuck your toes under. Make sure a common mistake in beast is that your hands start back too far, and then when we raise up, we don't have enough room to set into our hips back. So make sure your arms are at least where they'd normally be, right under your shoulders, maybe a centimeter further out. And so let's go ahead and melt off your knees, push on back, pushing through your shoulders away from the ground, keeping the back of your neck long with no wrinkles in it. Think about your chin slightly tucking, but do not maintain a chin tuck, as that's too aggressive of a neck position. If you want to move, you can do a little crawling back and forth. If you're not quite there, just work on shifting your weight from side to side without letting your body weight get outside of your knees. Another thing to remember is your feet are always more narrow than your heels. Your feet are more narrow than your knees in a beast. You don't want to have your feet too wide. Go ahead and rest down. You don't want to have your feet too wide because that will promote your knees to pinch inward. So by having a little bit more narrow foot position, it allows the knees to relax out to where they should be. All right, so let's come back up to your feet for a second. Take your time doing so. Grab a little drink of water if you need it. And so for the next one, we're going to use a band. For those of you who have a band, if you have it hooked up to a door, a counter, the foot of a bed, if it's not at this height, it's okay. It could be down low. What we're going to do is a little bit of a row pull with it. If you don't have a band, you can achieve the same action by putting one hand onto something and pulling on a weight straight back. Just make sure you're always keeping good energy pushing out of that down arm so that you're not sinking into any bad position on that shoulder blade. So if you've got a band, then I want you can do this on your feet if your knees bother you, but I'd like you to try, if it feels okay, to be on your knee. If you're anybody who has a little difficulty getting all the way down to the floor on your knee, if you have something like a super block, found at yogadirect.com. Yes, I know right now there's a $15 shipping fee, but unfortunately I can't find it anywhere else without that. So the super block can be very useful for anyone who can't quite get down to the ground easily. But what you're going to do is to make sure that whatever knee is on the floor, that's the same hand you want to be pulling on the band. The other leg is going to be out in front. It can be a little wide if you're a beginner. If you're starting to challenge yourself, you can kind of bring your foot a little bit more in line with your other knee. But just make sure that your knees are loose and wide. We don't want them pinching across the midline. And so we're just going to pull on that band and play around with your resistance so that you find that even when your arm is long, there's still tension on the band that your shoulder blade is pulling away from. Your shoulder is always anchored to the floor as you push length out of the knee on the floor, meaning that hip that's on the floor needs to be driving and pushing length down into the floor through the middle of your knee to make sure that we're not in this position. If we're bending in this position or we let this sneak up, all those things are difficult for the spine and your body won't like them, and it'll just make it a little harder for you to get into that movement. So let's go ahead and switch. Bring the other foot forward. Make sure your back foot, you can't see mine, but it's tucked under. Your foot toes should be on the ground, not the flats of your, not the top of your foot. And same thing, let's line up. If you're beginning, you can start with your foot a little wider. If you're a little bit more advanced, you can bring it in, but make sure you've got length in the back hip and you've got tension when your arm goes long. We do not want there to be slack in the line when your arm goes long, where then you can't feed into what you're trying to activate, and that's the lat and the ab connecting to stabilize your shoulder blade while your arm produces its movement. Give me one more. Good. And then come on up. Shake your weight, shake any tension out of your hands. We're going to go back to the floor in a second to go into some push-ups. And the reason that I came out and did this is the exact opposite. By giving a little pull action, we're going to use totally different muscles. And now when we go back to the floor, we're going to start pushing again. And that will kind of give us a chance to have gotten a little rest, but still challenge ourselves to keep going. So let's go ahead, find your way down. We're going to do some tricep push-ups first. Actually, all my push-ups are pretty much triceps. Sorry for any of you who have heard this before, a regular push-up where your elbows are out at, straight out from your shoulders, this is going to cause impingement issues in your shoulder and your neck over time. So it's better to train in this range of a push-up where your elbows are about 45-degree angle. We don't need to push them all the way up to there. It just increases the chances you're going to use the wrong muscles. Now, occasionally, I will say we're going to do some push-ups where your elbows really are staying in, kind of in line with your feet or your knees, and that will look more like this. But for right now, we're going to start on this one. So let's put your hands down, find a good position with your knees wide, your butt stuck up in the air in a nice beast butt position. And now let's go for just a regular set. Inhale down, exhale up. Trying to let your weight of your body fall towards the ground as your arms act as the hydraulics to lower it slowly and push it away from the floor. Lower and push. keeping the shoulders and ribs anchored away from the head the whole time, and making sure that your head is not reaching for the ground. We need to make sure the back of the head is almost reaching towards the sky during your push-up. All points, your head is, the base of your skull is trying to maintain its position close to the sky in comparison to the rest of your body. And see if that helps you feel that neutral neck position. It's not something we're trying to lock into and hold. It's something that we're trying to feel and maintain without a bunch of muscles trying to lock it in there. Good. Let's go one more. Keeping the back of that neck nice and high. And then let's go ahead and sit back or sit to the side, wherever feels comfortable. And just a little side note, if you are somebody who has to sit to the side, if you have a super block, sit to the side on the super block. It allows you to have a much more comfortable position through your hips, so you're not using your arm. You could even use a regular yoga block, and that will help a little bit too. And so for this next set of push-ups, we're going to use the band if you have it. My band is somewhere. All right, so we're going to use the band, and when you put the band on, we're going to want it right below the elbows when your hands are on the ground. So let's go ahead and find yourself into your hands and knees with a nice upturned butt. Toes are tucked under because they're always active. And let's make sure you have a little stretch on the band when you start. So if you need to widen up your hands just a little bit, that's okay. And now as you go down, this time your elbows are going to stay in line with your knees. So you're going to bring them down towards your knees and then back up. Make sure you're trying to push through your hands like you want the mat to stretch. You're trying to drive through the palms of your hands as you push your elbows back towards your knees. Keeping the width on the band, but not trying to go wider than the knees. Driving length through the back of the neck every time you're touching or trying to touch your elbows towards the mat. If you can't go all the way down to the mat with this one, then find the range that you can maintain all of your connections. And if you feel like this one isn't doing anything, odds are you're probably setting your weight too far back into your hips. So just try putting more body weight over your hands and feel that you don't drift backwards when you're pushing away from those palms, and you'll start to feel those triceps a lot more. Let's go ahead and give me two more. Perfect. And let's take off the band. And we're going to do one more beast. And with the beast, if you're really on top of your game, I want you to try a beast dog. If beast is hard enough and you can barely do a beast, stick with a beast. We're trying to practice the hardest thing you do well. But for some of you, I think that's a little bit more challenge. You need a little bit more challenge. So let's go ahead and put a block on your back if you've got it. Find your nice width between your knees. Feet slightly more narrow than your knees are. And when you drift off your knees, find that nice sit back. Find the normal beast first. And either continue on with your beast practice or try lifting one arm and one leg without letting that knee pinch in or lift off the ground more. And then switch. Finding your placement low in the knee and feeling that it doesn't raise up as you reach through your parts. And then back down and rest your knees down. Sit on back. Beast bird dog is not easy. I don't care who you are. But you can always work on small sets. Those were only 5 or 6 seconds. So work on a shorter set when you're trying to progress yourself up a little bit in challenge. And don't expect the exact same amount of time or feel like you didn't make it because you couldn't hold it as long. All right, so let's go ahead and we're going to go down for our clam set. And for the clam set, you're going to need a head support. You also need a block for your knee to rest on. If you're somebody who likes to use a band, you're welcome to use a band, but just make sure the band doesn't cause too much stress or too much challenge that you start feeling the wrong muscles pull into your back. So with this one, get my timer so I can kind of see on this one. With this action, the first set we're going to do is going to be with a long bottom leg. So I want that bottom leg to go as long through the hip as you can, almost behind you, but without going too far. And then I want the block to be where your knee rests, with your foot resting on your leg that's long. The arm that's closest to the floor, just let it be comfortable. Make sure your shoulder blade isn't pinched all the way up towards your ear. That's why I like a head support, because if you don't have a head support, it's very hard to keep a good neutral spine, and therefore your body won't really give you the best quality, because it's going to feel that pinch in there. So let's go ahead and make sure you're slightly forward rolled onto the front of your hip a little bit. We do not want to be on the back side. We also don't want to be right in this wobble territory. We want to be just on the front side of our hip bone. And we're going to start our clam 3 action with just reaching that knee towards the wall in front of you as you're anchoring your posture. If you have another block, or if you can reach the floor, you can use a light touch on the floor, but make sure that you're not leaning on it. You're pulling your shoulder away from the hand and anchoring the ribs with that touch, not using it as a way to pull you out of your posture. And so we're just going to keep going with these reaches of your knee. Good. We've got about 5 seconds left. Reaching that knee, not trying to go too high. Last one. Hold that knee up there. Tap the leg long. Tap the toe to touch the back of the leg. And just keep the knee in the same place as you lengthen and tap the foot to the leg behind. Good. Keep reaching through the heel, tapping. Reach through the heel, release and tap. Feel how the leg has to lengthen and then relax. And all that allows us to center and isolate better onto the hip, because our posture is staying so maintained and so connected. Now leave that leg out there and give me some lengthening leg lifts. And we're going to do 5 of these, and then we're going to do 5 circles in each direction. So now keep the leg low on the circles. We want to pass by the ankle bone with no more than about an inch in between ankle bones. So make sure your circle isn't too high. And then reverse your circle, go the other direction, and really use that connection of your abs and your lats and your shoulders and the length in your neck to help you maintain your balance without falling or feeling like you're wobbling backwards. And let's go ahead and do one more table cleaner, where you're floating your knee up and then lengthening it through the heel past your other leg. We're not trying to go backwards past the other leg. We're just trying to lengthen to meet it. Reaching through that heel, floating the knee up. Reaching through the heel, floating the knee up. Feeling everything connected through your posture, so that we're, yes, working your hip, but almost more importantly, we're really challenging that posture. And now let's go ahead and rest your knee onto your block. Give it some punch, give it some massage and love. That's also how you determine if you were doing the right thing. If you ever feel that you're not wanting to punch your hip, but you're wanting to rub your back, then that's a sign that we need to fix your movements a little bit. We need to make sure that we're using the right abs to help protect you from those bad movements. So let's go ahead and switch to the other side. We're just going to do 1 set of clams today. We've got abs to hit, and I want to save a little bit of time for a stretch. So same thing, let's go ahead and lay down. Find your leg on the bottom as long as you can, almost behind you. And then rest the other knee onto the block in front of you. Make sure you're on the front edge of your wobble bone. I know it's a fancy term for the side of your femur, but make sure that you're on the front side of that and you're not on the back side where you'll feel your back muscles kind of come in to try and balance you. We want to feel like your front muscles are there to balance just as much as those back. And so whatever position this hand wants to be in, that it's helping you anchor your locked shoulders and ribs. Keep the head nice and long And let's go ahead and reach into those clam threes. And with the clam three, we're reaching our knee towards that wall in front of us. We're not trying to go up as high as we can, because that's just going to mean we're rotating through our spine, which is not an area we want to rotate through. Good. Keep that loose foot just resting on the back leg. If you're ever feeling this in your knee more than you're feeling your hip or somewhere up in here, then relax the knee. Just relax and think about lifting this part of your leg. Don't think about picking your knee up. Sometimes just the thought of an area of our body will add tension to it. So just think of something else higher and closer to you that you're trying to lengthen from. Now let's leave the knee up there and give me some of your taps. Again, lengthen through the heel, relax and tap the heel to the leg. Lengthen, release. Keeping the knee loose, lengthening it, relaxing it. Keeping the posture nice and locked. Keep the shoulders down. Mine was creeping up a little bit. I felt it. Good. And then leave the leg out long. Let's give me some lengthening leg drops up and down. Reaching through that heel. Driving energy to keep the pelvis nice and neutral. If you're not lengthening through the heel, the pelvis can shift up towards your hips. And we don't want you to lose your neutral posture. Good. Now we're going to do our little circles. Good. A few in each direction, using that posture to keep everything anchored so you're isolating into here, but feeling everything in your abs working. Reverse your circle. We've got 5, 2, and rest your knee onto your block, and let's give it a little punch and rub. Good. Letting that whole leg relax, letting your hip just become silent and say good job. All right, so let's go ahead and do a couple abs real quick before we go into our stretch. And for the abs, let's go ahead and you're going to need a head support. You want your wedge if you've got it, or something to function like a little bit of a wedge. Although we don't need it for the very first exercise. If you just want to have it handy, you don't have to put it under your hips. And let's have your band if you've got one, and a kettlebell if you've got one. Dumbbell will work okay too. So let's go ahead, lay on down, find your comfortable position, make sure your head is supported and you don't feel like your neck is hanging off a cliff off your shoulders. We want one leg to be nice and long, and we want the other knee to be bent with the foot flat on the floor. We're going to bring our hands up behind your head. If you can't get your hands comfortably up behind your head, you could use like a towel or a washcloth or something that's rigid. I wouldn't use a band. I'm just kind of giving you this for the visual aid. You could use something to give you a little support behind your head if your arms can't get there, okay? But make sure you're not letting your shoulders creep up towards your ears or feeling anything uncomfortable. So let's go ahead and bring your elbows in close to your ears, lift up off your shoulder blades just a little bit, and hold here. We want the back of the neck to feel like somebody's pulling it by a string up the wall behind you, while your shoulders anchor away from it. And that really focuses all the energy into your upper abs and those lats. And so another way to think about it is the shoulders and the ribs anchoring down towards your feet. Your head should be able to just rest comfortably, but I think that having your hands to give it a little support is a good thing for some of my clientele. But if you've been doing this a while and you want to try and progress a little bit, don't let it go to your neck. Just feel how the length from the string up the wall and the shoulders away from the ears really can take a lot of the strain and the stress out of the neck when done properly. And now let's go ahead and rest down for a second. Let's switch your leg position. And we're going to go into the same one again. So hands behind the head, elbows in close, shoulders pull away from the ears, ribs pull away from the ears as you float off of your shoulder blades. Lengthen through the back of your neck off of your bra strap. If you're a guy, then I'd say heart rate monitor area. And just really try and use those upper abs to isolate. Keep the neck nice and loose, resting in your hands or lengthening away from the shoulders towards the wall, whichever you're working on today. 5, 4, 3, 2, and relax down. You should feel that all in this area right here. If you're feeling it anywhere else, message me, contact me. I'll be more than happy to give you my insight, or just let me know. It's never something that you want to be practicing that you feel discomfort in areas that you have symptoms in. If you're somebody who typically has a bad neck, or somebody who typically their lower back is bothering them, or maybe it's your knee. Everybody seems to kind of have one or two things that plague them a lot. And so if you're ever feeling the exercises that we're doing in those areas, please reach out to me. Let me tell you ways that you can help yourself get better without stressing things that we don't want to stress. But with all that being said, let's go into our next exercise, which we are going to need our wedge for. So if you don't have a wedge, use a small rolled towel or something just to give yourself a small support to maintain that little curve in your back. We do not want the wedge so that it puts our back flat on the ground. Let me make sure I'm clear on that point. You should have the wedge somewhere where when you let your legs relax to perpendicular, you feel that you're relaxed in the hips to do that. If you don't have the wedge and you try and put your legs at vertical, typically speaking, people will hold a lot of tension in the front of their hips and therefore pull into their back more than I would like. As we get stronger, yes, we can migrate away from the wedge, but we cannot take back pain away if we're holding tension in our hips during this exercise. If you can't bring your legs up comfortably, then this is the position, this is the action that you'll do with your legs during this set. But if you can, let's float your hands up into the air. If you have a band, you can use it. If not, don't worry about it. But I want you to lengthen one leg long as your arms push overhead, and then float everything back up tall. And then we lengthen through the heel to straighten the knee all the way as our arms push up away from our rib cage. Make sure our ribs anchor to the floor every time our arms push up away from our shoulders. Feel the length coming through the middle of your knee so that you can anchor it with your rib cage. And just feel that when you're floating these arms and legs through the action, that you're really working your abs. If you don't feel your abs at all and you're feeling other little things firing in, then again, this is not a practice that we want to keep working on. We want to really focus on success. Train success and get success. Let's go. 5, 4, 3, 2, and let's rest your arms out of the band. Move the wedge for a second. Let your legs fall out long. We're going to do a quick extension here. So let's put your arms out long with your palms facing up towards the sky. Your heels are out long on an outstretched leg. And let's go ahead and reach through your middle fingers. Reach through the back of your neck. Reach through your heels as your toes pull up towards your face. And just really lengthen through all parts of your body while you maintain connected through your ribs and your shoulder blades, anchoring towards your feet. Good. 5, 4, 3, 2, melt into the floor. Let your body relax a little bit. And so today we're going to do a little bit with a hip stretch. And this one is, there's 2 different versions to this one. We're going to go a little bit after the back of your hip. And half of it is on this one is an assessment, and the other half is going to be a little bit of a stretch. So a good shin box is a good indicator on how someone, the hip mobility that you have. And please watch for a second. Don't jump right into this one. It's not worth punishing yourself if you can't get into the position. But we want to bring one foot bent in front of us with the other foot bent behind us. And so just being able to assess, can you stand upright or sit upright in this position, or does it feel like this is where you are? Do not force sitting upright if this is where you are. It's just an assessment. And I want you to feel how far do you have to bring that arm out? Sorry, I got kettlebells. How far do you have to bring that arm out so you can get in this position? And if you can't get into it, you can't get into it. Just kind of watch for a second. You can always do a hip stretch that we did last week, or you could do a little bit more of our rocking that we did before, right before push-ups. But I want you just to assess, where is your tightness stemming from? What's locking you from making any upward position? And then switch to the other side. This first piece is just the assessment. I want you to feel what side feels tighter, what feels looser. Just assess the difference or the similarities between them. If you need one side that needs the arm to hold down, but the other side you're like, that's pretty comfortable, then that marks an imbalance, and we want to work on imbalances. Imbalances is what causes back pain. Not necessarily that somebody's completely weak or somebody's too strong. It's usually that one side is stronger than another, or more mobile than another. And so we want to be allowing ourselves to assess that from time to time, and also see that in a workout we're making positive gains on that, because with a good trainer, with a good physical therapist, with somebody who understands how your body works, you can get into a much better position with this shin box with just 3 or 4 more exercises. And if you can do 3 or 4 exercises and be able to get into a much better position on something in one session, then think what you can do with that as a culminating effect time after time after time. So don't always believe that thing that somebody says you need 6 to 8 weeks to see improvement. You can see improvement in one session with the right person, but you may not be able to see big strength muscle gains for 6 to 8 weeks. We know that it takes time, but we can make movement pattern differences in as little as one session when the person who you're working with really knows what they're talking about. So now, when we do one of the stretches for this, you're going to use a block to sit on. So it makes the action that you were just doing easier because you're a little bit higher off the ground. And so you're going to push and stand up tall through your knees, and then you're going to reach your hip back and stretch it out towards that block that you're going to sit onto, and then you're going to go back and up. Now, if you can't do this and you're just saying, looking at me right now saying, are you kidding me, Carrie? I am not doing that one. Then I'm going to show you something else right now. But for those of you who can do this action, I want you focusing on your shoulders pulling away from your ears, your butt trying to poke out and stretch back away from your knees each time, and really open up the back of your hip with this one. If you need something on either side, some super blocks are great. If you need something to help you get up off of that first little hump, that's okay too. Now, for everybody else, and I'm running out of time. For everybody else, if you're the first group, go ahead and switch legs and do the other side. If you're everybody else, another good version would be get onto your hands and knees, put one leg back and cross it over the other one, and put your knee somewhere near your ankle or your foot of the down leg. And then just kind of find your hands into position, and then just walk your hands towards the center of your body, meaning you're going to cross towards your belly button and stick your butt up in the air. You should feel your hip in the back of that hip getting a little stretch. And if you're not feeling it, I'm going to say do a little round under and then stick your butt up and out, and you'll feel that stretch coming into that up and out position. And just stay here, push through your arms, release all parts of your hips so you can feel a little stretch through the back. And then come back forward, and same thing, you can just switch. Make sure if your knee has more mobility issues, start further back and then cross your other leg, and that might make it a little bit easier for you to get into. And if you can't do either of these, that's okay. Find some way to stretch out the back of your hip after our session today. But you did great. Hopefully you learned a little bit. Hopefully you got your workout in for your Friday. And I'll see you next week. All right, have a great day.